Was a Wayans brothers reunion on your 2026 bingo card?
Hello?
What about the Looney Tunes going to court? Well, you can count on all that, some incredible stop motion, and a whole lot of Dwayne Johnson hitting the big screen at some point next year. Though their names haven't been associated with the series in a long time, brothers Keenan Ivory, Shaun, and Marlon Wayans were the comedic minds that came up with the concept for the Scream-focused horror spoof Scary Movie. After the original success, they came back for Scary Movie 2, but abandoned the franchise completely for the 3 movies that followed. The reason for this schism was conflict with Dimension Films heads Harvey and Bob Weinstein over money and creative control.
They were terrible people. Terrible people.
But in October 2024, it was announced that the Wayans brothers would return to the franchise for Scary Movie 6, which is set for release on June 12, 2026. We don't know for sure what roles each of the brothers will take on in production, but the fact that the trio is associated with the project at all gives us hope Scary Movie 6 will be a strong return to form for the series. Christopher Nolan keeps finding ways to push boundaries, which he proved with both the extremely divisive and confusing Tenet and the Oscar-winning powerhouse that was Oppenheimer. Of course, anything he's put out in the last 20 years or so has been a pretty major event, but he still continues to outdo himself in new and unexpected ways. And for that reason, we're thrilled to watch his take on the Odyssey. Based on the epic poem of the same name, this will be Nolan's first attempt at an old-fashioned swords and sandals saga, like 2004's Troy or the Gladiator franchise. And that's not the only way he's breaking the mold with this one. The Odyssey is a much more fantasy and mythology-heavy story than anything he's directed before, and we can't wait to see how he handles his concepts on the big screen. The movie just started filming in February 2025 with Matt Damon in the lead role, and as big an undertaking as this project is, it looks like we only have to wait until July 17th, 2026 to see the final product. Of all the media the first batch of post-DCEU movies and TV shows are produced, the ones related to Batman have shown the most promise so far. 2022's The Batman film was largely well received, and its spin-off HBO series The Penguin has received even more love and critical acclaim. For that reason, many fans hope that the upcoming horror movie Clayface will continue along the same trend. Based around the longtime Batman villain of the same name, Clayface will be directed by James Watkins and is scheduled for a September 11th, 2026 release. We don't know for sure if it will have any connection to the previous Batman projects or stand on its own, but we're dying to see how Clayface comes to life in live action. Maggie Gyllenhaal only started directing in the last few years, but she's already proved that she's not messing around with her new craft. Both her film The Lost Daughter and the episode of Homemade she worked on received some serious accolades, so we're very excited for her next feature. 2026's The Bride is a monster movie written, directed, and produced by Gyllenhaal. It will be a new film based around the wife of Frankenstein's monster, and while classic movie monsters have had a rough go of it in recent years, we're optimistic that Gyllenhaal might be able to turn the tide with The Bride. If nothing else, a possibility of seeing Christian Bale's take on Frankenstein's monster will be enough for us to buy a ticket. Few directors have kicked off their careers more impressively than Robert Eggers. The first 4 films he directed and co-wrote are all certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, and the many fans of his work live in a constant state of waiting for whatever he's cooking up next, even if they don't have any details. Which is why, even though we know next to nothing about Werwulf, we're ready to bet it will make waves in 2026. Eggers is once again slated to direct and co-write this period piece horror, which is set in 13th century England and presumably involves a werewolf. And while its Christmas 2026 release date may feel far away now, that just gives his audience even more time to start salivating over it. Fans of The Northman will be particularly delighted about this one, as its co-writer, Shaun, teamed back up with Eggers to write it. The live-action Resident Evil film series that ran from 2002 to 2016 certainly had its lows, but it was popular enough to earn 6 installments and gross a combined $1.2 billion worldwide. But after the 2021 reboot, Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City underperformed, it was back to the drawing board for the action horror adaptations. Luckily, Raccoon City wasn't the death sentence it could have been, and film studios burst into a bidding war over the rights to the zombie franchise. Fans of the game and recent horror will likely be thrilled to learn that Barbarian and Weapons director Zach Kreger is signed on to direct and co-write the new reboot, which is scheduled to release on September 18th, 2026. The only question now is, what's it called?
Honestly, I don't know.
You don't know?
That's right, Redfield, I do not know.
Though Sam Raimi has spent a lot of time in the world of big-budget Hollywood blockbusters in recent years, he cut his teeth in the horror genre. But now that efforts like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness and Oz the Great and Powerful are years behind him, Raimi is stepping back into horror for next year's Send Help. The premise sees two people as the only survivors of a plane that crashes on a deserted island, facing down a scary battle for survival. As to what that battle entails, well, your guess is as good as ours. A concept like this could easily veer into the world of the supernatural and feature monsters or dark magic, but it could just as easily fall within the parameters of the natural world as well. But considering there are currently 4 people listed in the cast, Rachel McAdams, Chris Payne, Dennis Haysbert, and Dylan O'Brien, we're willing to bet that there's more to the plot than the synopsis lets on. Filming for Send Help wrapped in April, and is scheduled to release on January 30th, 2026. There was a time when it seemed like the animation live-action hybrid Coyote vs. Acme was never going to see the light of day. Despite a stellar cast featuring Will Forte, John Cena, and various Looney Tunes characters, it joined fellow Warner Brothers projects Scoob, Holiday Haunt, and Batgirl in the unfortunate club of movies that had already been completed but were still cancelled for tax write-off purposes.
You gotta be kidding me. Who greenlit this garbage?
While there are currently no plans to revive the other 2 films, Coyote vs. Acme was rescued by independent distributor Ketchup Entertainment in 2025, alongside the previously doomed Looney Tunes film, The Day the Earth Blew Up. Coyote vs. Acme is set to hit theaters sometime in 2026, and since Ketchup Entertainment successfully released The Day the Earth Blew Up in March 2025, we're optimistic that we'll actually get to see this one as well. The 28 Days Later trilogy is finally meeting its end in 2025, with the release of the aptly named 28 Years Later. And though 28 Years Later arrived a full 23 years after the original movie, it's just a start for the franchise in some ways. 28 Years Later also marks the beginning of a spin-off series, and its follow-up 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, is already set to hit theaters on January 16th, 2026. 28 Days Later and 28 Years Later writer Alex Garland is writing The Bone Temple and will also write its follow-up. And while director Danny Boyle did helm 28 Years Later, he's handing directing duties for The Bone Temple off to the Marvel's director, Nia DaCosta. Boyle will come back for the spin-off trilogy's final entry, which will mark the first time he's directed 3 films in the same franchise. Weirdly enough, something the 28 Days series and Disney have in common is that they tend to space their franchise installments out by years at a time. So it's somewhat unusual that the live-action remake of Moana is slated to come out just 2 years after 2024's animated sequel, Moana 2. And speaking of unusual, Dwayne Johnson has been recast as Maui, making him the first actor to voice a Disney character in an animated film and then play them in a live-action remake, unless you count James Earl Jones as Mufasa.
Is that a challenge?
In her film debut, Catherine Legaya will be taking over as Moana herself in her second ever screen credit after the 2023 Amazon Prime series, The Lost Flowers of Alice Hart. The live-action Moana should hit theaters on July 10th, 2026, 10 years after the first film came out. Shaun the Sheep may have started as a Wallace and Gromit spin-off, but at this point, the character, his films, and his TV shows have become an equally iconic pillar of Aardman animation. So far, there have been 2 Shaun the Sheep films, the most recent of which was 2019's A Shaun the Sheep movie, Farmageddon. The next film, The Beast of Mossy Bottom, will follow along from the TV series' 6th season, 2020's Adventures from Mossy Bottom. So far, all we know about its release date is that it's slated to come out sometime in 2026. When it came out, the general consensus was that Toy Story 3 saw the perfect ending for Woody, Buzz, and the rest of Andy's toy collection. So a lot of people were understandably skeptical when the news broke that a 4th Toy Story movie was coming to screens. Even so, Toy Story 4 cracked the $1 billion mark worldwide and received nearly the same amount of praise as its predecessor. And now that they've proved the doubters wrong once, Disney and Pixar are rolling the dice on at least one more entry to the franchise. Toy Story 5 will hit theaters on June 19th, 2026. By the time 2016's Ice Age Collision Course came out, there was already plans for the next entry. But a lot happened over the next few years that put the franchise on, well, ice. Specifically, the COVID-19 pandemic decimated the film industry for several years, and Disney bought out Ice Age's original home, 20th Century Fox. It took a while to get an update, but in September 2024, Ice Age star John Leguizamo hinted at Ice Age 6 on a podcast, and it wasn't long before the official announcement followed. We don't know much about the film at the moment, but it is confirmed that Ray Romano, Queen Latifah, and Dennis Leary are all coming back. It will be interesting to see how the first Disney-backed Ice Age pans out, but we won't have to wait too long to find out. Ice Age 6 floats into theaters on December 18th, 2026.
The herd is back, baby!
Marvel alums Chris Hemsworth, Mark Ruffalo, and Barry Keoghan will join Halle Berry, Nick Nolte, Jennifer Jason Leigh, and Tate Donovan for the February 2026 heist film Crime 101. Co-written by Conclave Oscar winner Peter Strawn, the movie's adapted from the Don Winslow novella of the same name. The title comes from the strict set of rules that a jewel thief has been following for years, which have helped him elude capture. As far as we know right now, any one of the cast could be the thief or the detective chasing them, but don't be surprised if nobody ends up being who they seem in this twisty mystery. Sam Raimi's original Evil Dead trilogy was all about continuity. Well, it had the same leading man for all three at least. But since the 2013 remake came out, all we've gotten are standalone films like Evil Dead and Evil Dead Rise. And in 2026, we're in for yet another with Evil Dead Burn. Raimi may not be writing or directing, but Evil Dead Burn is being released by his company, Ghost House Pictures, and he'll be one of the movie's producers. It is set to be released in July 2026. On a lighter note, the third entry in the modern run of Jumanji movies is toying with a December 11th, 2026 release date. So far, only Jack Black and director Jake Kasdan have outright confirmed they're returning for the new installment, but it's more than likely co-stars Dwayne Johnson, Karen Gillan, and Kevin Hart are coming back as well. So far, there's not much on the storyline of the new movie, though it's possible that it could pick up from the mid-credits scene at the end of Jumanji: The Next Level. Hart said in 2023 that early discussions about the story were largely focused on the relationship between his and Johnson's characters, and it would certainly be great to see their arc reach a conclusion. But whether that will come in this movie or a future installment remains to be seen. Spider-Man is one of the only pieces of the Marvel Cinematic Universe that has gotten consistently high-quality treatments and solid box office returns. Even more impressively, Marvel pulled out all the nostalgic subs for Spider-Man No Way Home, which leaves very little left to do in terms of fan service.
Would you look at that?
So it seems fitting that the next entry in the series is subtitled Brand New Day. Very little is known about the movie right now, but we assume it will probably have to do with the comic book arc of the same name. Currently, the film has its web shooters aimed at a July 31st, 2026 release date. The Scream franchise has done what many of its horror contemporaries couldn't quite pull off. It maintained a consistent canon across its first 6 films, becoming one of the longest-running horror franchises in history without so much as a soft reboot. That made the announcement that the original Scream's Matthew Lillard will be returning for next year's Scream 7 a huge shock, given that his character met what we thought was a definitive end in the first installment. But Lillard teased his return on social media in 2025, and fans are shaking in their boots with excitement. How exactly the film will pull off Stu's return remains a close-guarded secret, so we'll just have to see for ourselves when it comes out on February 27, 2026. Speaking of horror movie reboots, The Exorcist is getting its first one ever next year. So far, every existing film in the Exorcist universe has been a direct sequel or prequel, though some of them definitely played fast and loose with the series' continuity. But 2026's Untitled Exorcist film is being billed as a full-on fresh start for the franchise. It's unclear whether it will still draw from the 1971 novel the original movie was based on, or if it's going to have an entirely new story and new characters. Either way, prolific horror showrunner Mike Flanagan is tied to the next project, which would be enough on its own to get us in seats when the movie comes out next year. While Disney, DreamWorks, Illumination, and Sony Pictures Animations have been battling for the title of greatest major animation studio for a few decades now, independent stop-motion house Laika has been quietly churning out some of the best animated films of our time. The company's been quiet since 2019's Missing Link came out, but that's set to change next year with Wildwood. Based on the 2011 novel of the same name, Wildwood sees a young girl and her friend try to rescue the girl's younger sister from a mysterious and dangerous magical forest. After it was originally scheduled to come out in 2025, Wildwood is now set to arrive sometime in 2026, with the exact date to be determined. Filmmaker Denis Villeneuve has slowly earned a reputation for pulling off the impossible. Not only did he make a respectable sequel to Blade Runner, but he may have even surpassed the classic original with Blade Runner 2049. Then he proved that Frank Herbert's dense and seemingly unfilmable Dune novels really could be properly adapted for the big screen, with Dune and Dune Part 2. That being said, the third installment is where a lot of movie series go wrong, particularly sci-fi trilogies. So we'll see if Villeneuve can create another cinematic miracle when Dune Messiah hits theaters on December 18th, 2026. After wowing critics with the inventive 2015 horror movie It Follows, writer-director David Robert Mitchell followed that up with the extremely ambitious and surreal action comedy Under the Silver Lake. But neither critics nor audiences were particularly impressed with that one. After taking a roughly 8-year break, Mitchell is making his attempt at a comeback into the film world in 2026 with Flowervale Street. So far, all we know about it is that it's a sci-fi adventure starring Ewan McGregor and Anne Hathaway. The details about the plot beyond that are scant. After originally aiming for a March release, Flowervale Street is now set to come out on August 14th, 2026. The Bride and Werewolf aren't the only attempts at bringing a classic movie monster back to the big screen coming in 2026. Unfortunately, The Mummy's name gives it a lot more to live up to, considering it's following a beloved action trilogy from the late 90s and early 2000s, and a less beloved attempt at a reboot starring Tom Cruise from 2017. So it's probably wise that the people behind this latest addition to the bandaged zombie genre opted to make this one more of a horror film than an Indiana Jones-esque action-adventure. Lee Cronin, who wrote and directed Evil Dead Rise, will again serve those two jobs for The Mummy. So this take on the classic monster might actually be properly scary. Either way, it is currently set to be released on April 17th, 2026. Ever since Greta Gerwig's Barbie absolutely took over the world in 2023, fans have been desperate to find out what her next project will be. And aside from some uncredited writing on the disastrous live-action Snow White, it's looking like that is going to be a movie set in the Narnia universe. Gerwig is specifically adapting the novel The Chronicles of Narnia, the Magician's Nephew. Technically, it was the 6th book published in the series, but it's chronologically a prequel to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. If all goes well, that would make a perfect opening number for a whole new Narnia franchise.
Try me.
Currently, the film is set to have a limited IMAX release starting November 26, 2026, before coming to Netflix on Christmas Day. There's another Wuthering Heights adaptation in the works, and English majors everywhere are either screaming with glee or smashing their skulls against their writing desks. And while it might be easy to roll your eyes at the prospect of yet another adaptation of Emily Bronte's classic novel, this one's being directed by Emerald Fennell and may deserve the benefit of the doubt. Fennell's two previous films, Promising Young Woman and Saltburn, were both original works with relatively modern-day settings, so this will be a welcome change of pace. She's already seen some backlash for casting Jacob Elordi and Margot Robbie as the leads, but she's still sticking to her guns. She even turned down Netflix's $150 million offer for the film in favor of less money and a more traditional theatrical release. With her artistic integrity still intact, we're eager to see exactly how Fennell's handled her first feature-length adaptation when it comes out on February 13th, 2026. For the most part, South Park keeps co-creators Trey Parker and Matt Stone too busy to do much else. And while they found time to write a hit Broadway musical and drop millions on reviving Denver's Casa Bonita restaurant and theme park, it's been decades since they last worked on a movie together. So it's not insignificant that March 20th, 2026 will see the first movie Trey Parker has directed in 22 years. Though it's currently untitled, we actually have more details about its plot than some of the other movies on this list. Written by longtime South Park writer and producer Vernon Chapman, it centers around a man who works at a living history museum playing a slave. He eventually comes to find out that his ancestors were actual slaves and that his girlfriend's ancestors owned them. Given that it's co-produced by rapper Kendrick Lamar and is sure to be full of Parker and Stone's famously offensive humor, the angry op-eds will practically write themselves.
Do you want to hang out?
Megan raked in over $180 million at the box office after debuting in theaters at the end of 2022. The Blumhouse-produced film followed a psychotic AI doll who goes to great lengths to protect a young girl, despite the increasing worries of her aunt, played by Allison Williams. It's no surprise that the Megan universe is set to expand with two follow-ups, Megan 2.0 in the summer of 2025 and Soulmate, which will hit theaters in 2026. In a clever twist of the Megan premise, Soulmate will center on a man's ownership of an AI android following the loss of his wife. Kate Dolan, who previously helmed the horror film You Are Not My Mother, will direct, while Lily Sullivan, David Riesdahl, and Claudia Dumit are currently set to star. It's been quite a few eventful years for fans of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Although the original Nickelodeon series only aired for 3 seasons in the mid to late 2000s, it has seen numerous spin-offs, reboots, and adaptations. Of course, there have been reinterpretations of the series fans would rather forget, like M. Night Shyamalan's 2010 live-action film. However, 2026 will see a much more highly anticipated installment in the Avatar timeline. It was announced all the way back in 2021 that Avatar: The Last Airbender will be getting a proper animated sequel. Although little is known about its story, it will continue to explore the adventures of the beloved airbending character from the iconic animated series. Eric Nam will make his debut as the voice of Aang, while Dave Bautista is joining the franchise as a yet-to-be-revealed antagonist. In 2003, Mike Myers starred in The Cat in the Hat, which notably resulted in Dr. Seuss's widow, Audrey Geisel, putting a stop to all live-action adaptations of her husband's work. The film has its cult following today, but thankfully the Seuss enterprise will have a second chance at putting the cat on the big screen in a new animated film. Created by Warner Bros. Pictures Animation, the new Cat in the Hat film will head to theaters in 2026, starring Bill Hader as the title character. Hader actually portrayed the character in an SNL sketch, though in this iteration, the cat had previously dated the women of the children he plays with.
I could juggle with this, I could juggle with a fish, I could juggle this dish, I could... You cut me out of this picture.
Alessandro Carloni, who co-directed Kung Fu Panda 3 for DreamWorks Animation, is directing alongside Erica Rivanoja, and hopefully they're able to do the children's book justice. Ryan Gosling has been the belle of the ball in the film world for the past few years, and 2026 might feature Gosling's next home run. Project Hail Mary, based on the 2021 sci-fi novel from Andy Weir and directed by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, will star Gosling as Ryland Grace, an amnesiac astronaut uncovering the mystery of why he's the last man standing in a crew searching the galaxy for an end to Earth's near demise. Gosling will be joined by fellow Oscar nominee Sandra Hüller, who wowed audiences in 2023 with back-to-back performances in Anatomy of a Fall and The Zone of Interest. There's sure to be a lot of buzz in the science fiction community over this adaptation of the 2022 Hugo Award finalist, but given it's one of the few non-franchise films scheduled for release in 2026 so far, it might also be a sleeper hit for mainstream audiences. There was rightfully a lot of trepidation leading up to the release of the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Video game adaptations have a well-documented history of disappointing fans in movie theaters, and the Super Mario franchise already had one failed attempt in the 90s. Despite online criticisms of the cast, the Super Mario Bros. Movie grossed over $1 billion and was praised for being a flawed but worthy adaptation of the iconic Nintendo franchise. Illumination CEO Chris Meledandri and Mario creator Shigeru Miyamoto finally confirmed that a sequel would be coming with a tentative release date of April 2026, reuniting directors Aaron Horvath and Michael Jelenic with screenwriter Matthew Fogel. Judging by the post-credit scenes of the Super Mario Bros. Movie, the character Yoshi could make a proper debut on the big screen, while actors like Charlie Day and Seth Rogen have also expressed interest in exploring their own characters. Kevin Feige not only confirmed that directors Anthony and Joe Russo would return to the Marvel Cinematic Universe to helm the next two Avengers movies, but that the multiverse saga would be pivoting from Kang the Conqueror to one of the biggest baddies in Marvel Comics, Victor Von Doom. To the shock of everyone at Hall H and online, Avengers Doomsday is not only coming up fast in 2026, but Robert Downey Jr. will be returning to the Avengers universe as Dr. Doom. While the decision to recast Downey Jr. after the actor's triumphant curtain call as Iron Man in Avengers Endgame may have gone over poorly with some fans of the MCU, one thing is certain: people will be flooding into theaters to see this performance. It's actually surprising that there hasn't been a Star Wars feature film since 2019. Still, the franchise has been busy on Disney Plus with plenty of streaming series, the most popular being The Mandalorian, which follows the adventures of the titular bounty hunter after discovering a Jedi child named Grogu, who's a target of Imperial factions.
I would like to see the baby.
There's a lot to be excited about with this new chapter of the Star Wars saga, which has only just begun shooting. Given the broad scale of the Disney Plus series, one can only imagine how big things are going to get in a feature film starring Din Djarin and his fellow characters, including some new faces. Sigourney Weaver has already confirmed that she's appearing in the movie, which will certainly draw in all kinds of sci-fi fanatics. A Masters of the Universe reboot movie has been in the works for over a decade now, but it's only recently that actual movement has been made on the project, with a current theatrical release date of June 5th, 2026. Travis Knight, who made his live-action directorial debut with 2018's Bumblebee, is set to direct it for Amazon MGM Studios. Perhaps the film owes its forward motion to Mattel's success in 2023 with Barbie, which also went through development hell before becoming a surprise Best Picture nominee. It's also possible that there's renewed interest in the franchise thanks to Netflix's She-Ra and the Princess of Power, which ran for 5 seasons on the streaming service. For now, there's at least hope in the fact that the film's early casting looks promising, with the Idea of You star Nicholas Galitzine cast as He-Man and Camila Mendes of Riverdale fame playing Teela. The next few years will be very exciting for DC Comics fans who have been let down by the lack of direction in its cinematic universe.
So as many of you know, DC has been disconnected in film and television for a long time.
That's all set to change in 2025, now that James Gunn is CEO of DC Studios and putting his energy into directing Superman. It's going to be a huge reinvention of the DC universe on the big screen, and in 2026, it'll be followed up by Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, starring Millie Alcock, who will debut as Clark Kent's cousin in next year's film. Of course, Alcock will have big boots to fill after the beloved portrayal of the character by Melissa Benoist in the CW Supergirl, but leave it to James Gunn to find new grounds to break. Currently, the film is set to release on June 26, 2026, with directing duties performed by Craig Gillespie, whose past work includes female-driven films like Cruella and the Oscar-nominated I, Tonya. It had been quite a few years on the Shrek front after 2010's Shrek Forever After, and 2011's Puss in Boots potentially indicated that the once tremendously successful animated franchise may have lost its fairy tale dazzle. But the series was finally revived in 2022 with Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, with the film earning an Oscar nomination for Best Animated Feature and surpassing its expectations at the box office. The ending of Puss in Boots: The Last Wish even set the stage for a future Shrek film, with Puss and Kitty Softpaws venturing back to the land of far, far away. Shrek 5 was confirmed to be happening later in 2023, with Eddie Murphy, Mike Myers, and Cameron Diaz all returning. As expected, there's a lot of mystery surrounding what Jordan Peele is up to. The sketch comedian cemented himself as one of film's most influential modern directors with Get Out, and has kept up the trend by creating outstanding horror films with black leads in Us and Nope. Even his production company, Monkey Paw, has been behind creative projects like Monkey Man and Candyman. Peele's next film as a director has a confirmed theatrical release date of October 23rd, 2026, just in time for Halloween. It might be hard to get excited about a movie that has no other information available, but given Peele's track record so far, it'll always be worthwhile to see what this auteur comes up with. The Hunger Games: A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was a reminder of how huge Suzanne Collins' book franchise was when it hit the big screen. Featuring an all-star cast, the film's box office performance alone was proof that audiences were hungry for more stories set in Panem. One is already slated for release on November 20th, 2026, centering on another familiar character from the original book trilogy. The Hunger Games: Sunrise on the Reaping centers on the 50th Hunger Games, notably won by Hamish Abernathy, the character portrayed by Woody Harrelson in the original films. The book it's based on is set for release in early 2025, while a film adaptation was confirmed in June 2024.